All right, I admit. Ever since I died for the third time, I stopped loving anyone. My monsters stare at me with bloodshot eyes, but they too have become just a simple tool. I can no longer talk to them, give them names, or enjoy being in their company. Honestly, they're all imperfect. They cannot entertain me as I'm aware of that fact. They stop being my friends, though it's not their fault. Sometimes I feel like sadness paints itself on their ugly faces, and their eyes can glisten with moisture, as if they carry some sort of reproach. I can't really bring myself to care. Sorry, boys, I've lost too much to mourn that I no longer have a heart for you. First off, I lost my sanctuary. I sit in a workshop packed with shelves full of figurines, soaked in the smell of varnishes and different plastic materials, full of tools and sketches scattered everywhere, but it's no longer my magical kingdom. It's more like a place of constant trials and failures. Unimaginable. I never thought the workshop could become a place filled with frustration. Now, I can almost hear every wall screaming. Each new figurine is a failure. I fought long and hard for my own piece of the world, so it's hard to watch as peace and satisfaction scream and flee through the door kicked violently open. Okay, I express myself in a somewhat exalted way, but I have some rights to that. I'm an artist. That explains me somehow. It defines me in the eyes of the world. What's more, to the majority with common sense, I'm an unfulfilled artist because I got kicked out of university. Ever since I stopped being a child, I knew what I wanted to do in life. To the concern and horror of my closest family, I had no intention of becoming a doctor, lawyer, entrepreneur, or banker. Heaven forbid, I wasn't even interested in marketing or management. Not only did I not want to manage anyone, but I consciously tried to prevent any situation where someone would manage me, which, of course, ruled out any honest job. I intended to become a sculptor. The first years at university turned out to be a bloody disappointment. I was messing around with clay, doing countless studies of plaster heads, and the only entertainment came from idiotic performances. Professors either looked on with approval or with a condescending smile as students poured paint over themselves, rolled on the ground, making inarticulate sounds worthy of a dog whose tail had been slammed in a door, or pushed around massive, spiced-up genitalia in wheelbarrows. Damn it, I went there to sculpt, not to participate in occupational therapy at a ward for hopeless lunatics. But whatever, I gritted my teeth and decided to endure. God, what a bunch of lunatics. The hallways were haunted by girls wrapped in drab robes, looking like bundles of rags in those outfits, rolling their eyes and talking about visions. Guys, mumbling under their breath, sporting appropriately artistic hairstyles, constantly bumped into visions, too. Visions, in general, were very fashionable. All conversations revolved around them, as well as mutual assurances of how art should stimulate, shock, and open people's eyes to the contemporary issues of humanity. And me? Hell, I just wanted to be a good sculptor. If my goal had been to open eyes, I would have become a damn ophthalmologist. The grand finale happened at the end of my third year. A famous sculptor from Japan was invited to the school for a special presentation. She performed only once, in one of the more prestigious galleries. Dressed in the obligatory drab robes, she solemnly poured out the contents of 12 small bags onto the floor. One contained sand, another gravel, and the rest, plain dirt. That was it. The whole sculpture. Everyone rushed to admire the piece with enthusiasm. Very groundbreaking and very eco-friendly. Art of the earth. That's when I asked who the fuck was going to clean it up. The scandal was truly international. They told me I was being expelled for lack of progress and an inappropriate attitude. Thank you, God, for saving me from the appropriate one. I took on various odd jobs. I painted apartments, made custom greeting cards, and did a bit of interior design. One time, a friend asked if I could sculpt a few Christmas figurines of angels. They turned out hideous. Their faces looked like a bunch of drunkards, but miraculously, they were an instant hit. Precisely because they were so ugly. The shop owner declared they were innovative and unconventional. She ordered more of them, no longer related to Christmas. And that's how the monsters were born. They sold like hot cakes, I established a reputation, and in time, I started earning enough to maintain a decent living. No luxuries, but it was enough for me. The most important thing was that I found the right path. I sculpted figurines, and no other job had ever brought me greater satisfaction. I found fulfillment. Well, I admit, these aren't any monumental works, but they brought me joy. I managed to make a living by sculpting, at least in my own eyes. When I look back, I realize that the time I spent alone, inventing the first monsters, was the happiest period of my life. My memories of that time are accompanied by a blissful feeling that the world is open, welcoming, and full of possibilities. In this state of mind and finances, I met Margot. Good heavens, she was gorgeous, with a doll-like face, big dark eyes, a short black bob, and a soft, French-like voix. Tiny, almost delicate, with a perfect hourglass figure and lovely legs. She had the grace of a trinket. She looked like she'd escaped from a music box. I felt like I could easily hold her in my hands. I fell in love instantly, naively, and thoughtlessly. I was enchanted by everything. Her chirping and giggling. The way she laughed, revealing small, even teeth, her nails painted in a vivid scarlet, as if she'd just torn apart a hunted prey with them. The countless bows and feathers she adorned herself with. Her flirtatious glances and flawless makeup, making her look like a porcelain figurine. The little and bigger whims, always tinged with a hint of snobbery, to remind everyone that she'd grown up in France. There were always a few men hovering around her, and she accepted their admiration and devotion as her due. She'd even get a bit uneasy if there were fewer than 3 men by her side. She navigated among them like a seasoned tamer, giving each just enough smiles to keep his hope alive, but not enough to make any feel special. Margot Curly Bob. I orbited around her like one of the more distant satellites, with almost no chance of success. Perhaps that's how it would have ended if it weren't for my monsters. That season, they started selling better than well. Unexpectedly, they became fashionable. Prestigious galleries and expensive shops reached out to me for orders. Some were bought by a TV star, others by a popular athlete. Someone interviewed me for a glossy magazine, and one of the galleries used my name in their advertising. During that time, I slowly transformed, in Margot's eyes, from a harmless weirdo to an intriguing artist. Intriguing enough to be worth showing off with. This sent me into such euphoria that I could have kissed all my monsters on their ugly faces, for it was thanks to them that I earned her favor. Margot Curly Bob noticed me. What more could I wish for? We started seeing each other, though at first never alone. We'd hang out at bars, always in larger groups. At parties with friends, she clearly favored me, even though other guys still vied for her attention. She spoke a lot about the need to understand an artist's unique soul, joked and smiled playfully, and I felt like angels were flying around my head with harps and bowls of incense. I couldn't believe my luck. Meanwhile, the sale of my monsters grew even further, and among our friends, we began to be perceived as a couple. Margot wasn't in any hurry to deny it. It didn't bother her to see other men, though. No, I don't have time for you today, I already have plans. Jealousy was eating me up inside. Sometimes I dared to make a remark, but then she would pout and accuse me of limiting her freedom. My possessiveness hurt her. After all, what was wrong with having friends? Did I want her to live her life in a cage? Of course I didn't. What right did I have to corner her with my distrust? Absolutely none. Was a woman always supposed to endure the tyranny of her partner? God, I had no intention of tyrannizing her. I would retreat, terrified at the thought of losing her. Yet it always ended in sighs and looks full of reproach. Once, during one of these conversations, she looked me deeply in the eyes and said I couldn't hold the wind in my arms. I swear, she said that pretentious cliché. But to me, it sounded poetic, evidence of her great sensitivity and the mysterious feminine nature. I was even moved. Damn, what else could you expect from me? I was hopelessly in love. In the end, Margot would leave, and I would console myself with the memory of that wonderful day when she first went to bed with me. To be honest, It wasn't as amazing as I dreamed it would be because I was the one showing most of the enthusiasm. Princess Margot acted a bit like Snow White in a coma, but I kept imagining these beautiful scenes where I was awakening her with my kisses, even though I couldn't picture myself as a prince for the life of me. I felt more like a cobbler who'd miraculously gotten his half of the kingdom, a rough guy with big hands, always stained with paint, a cigarette in his mouth, and a hatred for ties. Margot quickly picked up on this game. I could tell she enjoyed it. The little fairy had tamed something halfway between a wild tar maker, a bear, and a lunatic with the soul of an artist. Part of the rules of the game also included admiring the modern-day princes we encountered, those slick jerks in impeccably tailored suits, flashing their white teeth, fanning themselves with stacks of credit cards, and dancing like they had a wind-up spring inside them. When Margot laid eyes on one of those creatures, strange flames would light up in her pupils, her voice would turn into a coo with that charming, vibrating ah, and her movements would become faint. In short, complete admiration and submission. Luckily, she didn't come across them too often, and even if she did, she always eventually came back to me. She joked that she didn't understand why she was giving up such a refined man of the world in favor of her own personal black primitive. Had I charmed her? In truth, it was the other way around. She had cast the spell on me. I realized I wanted her to stay with me forever when she left for an entire summer vacation to France to visit some distant relatives. Of course, not to work, just to sunbathe, swim, sightsee, and make new acquaintances. Days passed, Margot was gone, and I paced around my workshop like a furious tiger, tormented by the thought of the connections she was making with bands of dark-eyed, slick-haired Frenchmen, arriving on yachts or driving up in Jaguars. The longer she was away, the less I could imagine a future without her. Finally, she returned, tanned, chattering away, recounting her conquests to anyone who would listen. One millionaire was so distracted by her that he fell into a pool, and some Arab sheikh wanted to trade an entire oil well for her. Wasn't that adorable? Of course, it was adorable, just like every gesture, expression, and smile, just like the fact that she had come back. I gazed at her with puppy dog eyes, a stupid grin glued to my face, and it never crossed my mind to wonder why she didn't stay in France as the happy wife of a millionaire. The important thing was, she was here. She had come back to me. After a few sleepless nights, filled with visions of tech moguls in pools and Arab tycoons whisking Margot away into the desert, I decided I couldn't bear the uncertainty any longer. The monsters were selling like hotcakes, so I withdrew my savings from the account, bought a diamond ring, small, but real, an enormous bouquet of roses, big enough for her to hide inside, and I dropped to my knees in front of her. She didn't seem moved. More like surprised, and a bit amused. She looked at the ring with mild condescension, as if to say that she couldn't have expected anything better from someone with such poor taste in jewelry, but she accepted it. By God, she accepted it! I felt like crying with joy, carrying the whole world in my arms, kissing every passerby, and buying a bicycle for every kid in the neighborhood. Margot Curly Bob was going to be my wife. She became my wife, though I could hardly believe it. Of course, she moved in with me, giving up her rented room. For the honeymoon, I wanted to take her to the Côte d'Azur, but she didn't feel like going. Too many memories, she said. Fine, we went to the Italian Riviera instead. Lying on the sand within reach of the giggling, caressing waves, she looked like the daughter of Poseidon himself. She offered me 2 happy weeks, although even then I subconsciously sensed that my relationship with Margot wasn't going to turn out the way I'd imagined. I pushed my doubts aside, but it soon became clear that my little girl had no intention of becoming the closest person in my life, my friend, partner, support, and lover. Instead, she remained a constant reward, an object of ongoing homage, admiration, and sighs. Day after day, I had to earn her all over again, relieve her of everything, and win her favor. I tried, but to be honest, everything slipped through my fingers. Sometimes I thought that even if, as she wished, I ripped out my guts and hung them on the nearby Christmas trees, she'd just purse her lips and say it could have looked better. In short, things weren't going well between us. The princess lay on the couch and threw fits, while I slammed the door to my workshop and stayed there until late at night. It was my sanctuary, a fortified stronghold where no one cared about the mess, the smell of cigarettes, my worn-out pants, or my lack of engagement. On top of that, the monsters were no longer the hit of the season. I knew it would happen, and I didn't mind at all. Honestly, I was a bit relieved. The buzz was over, but I remained in the market with enough income to support us. But there was no longer any publicity, no magazine interviews, no TV flashes, which for my beautiful wife was comparable with a national tragedy. I had suffered a crushing defeat, ruined my career, and led her, poor thing, astray. How could I now provide the princess with the proper conditions when I didn't have a decent job? Why had she ever gotten involved with me? I couldn't understand either. There probably wasn't a man in the world less suited to her ideals. Almost 2 years had passed since I secretly christened Margot with the bitter name of Snow White because, from the start of our marriage, she was as cold and lifeless as if in a catatonic state. Then again, who could blame her? How could anyone go to bed with a thoughtless brute who didn't understand the subtle female soul? Clearly, they couldn't. So, we turn our nose to the wall, sigh deeply, and show the world our incredible sensitivity and loneliness. I'd had enough of it so many times that I often wished I could just leave the house, slam the door, and never come back. Sign up for the sea, run away to the woods to make charcoal, live at the train station, weave baskets in the wilderness, anything. Just to get far away from here. But I still loved Margot deeply and hoped that she would change, get used to it, understand. She did change, oh yes. Completely unexpectedly, but not in the way I had hoped. She left for 2 weeks to visit a friend, to escape the problems for a while. What problems? For God's sake, she didn't explain. She returned with the firm conviction that she wanted to have a baby immediately. Her friend had just had one and had found fulfillment and the joy of true womanhood, so Margot wanted the same. I was a little scared because I didn't feel ready to be a father, and my curly bob didn't strike me as mother material. I tried to reason with her, suggesting we enjoy each other's company a bit longer, wait it out. To no avail. I was branded a heartless monster, a vile egotist, a deceiver who had tricked her and was now denying her the only joy, robbing her of a true family. I tried to stand firm, but she sulked, cried, threw hysterics, raged, and insulted me until I finally cracked. Margot quickly and efficiently turned me into a psychopath who was tormenting his own child in the name of selfishness and vain dreams of a sculptor's career. I swallowed that, too. Lately, I was swallowing everything, like an obedient boa constrictor. But I didn't give in. I hardened myself and decided to hold my ground. Margot married a guy who makes figurines. She made that decision consciously, I believe, and in a sound state of mind. So now she has him as a husband. No firms, suits, solemn expressions, or grey cars. Never. Of course, war broke out. A dirty, underhanded, exhausting guerrilla war, based mainly on terrorist attacks. I didn't give in. What I saw on my wife's face was disbelief and fury. I dared to defy the princess. I dared to oppose Margot. I had to, for God's sake. It was a fight for survival. Otherwise, I would have just died. I don't know where women get this deeply ingrained belief that everyone, especially men, can and should be changed. To need a man like clay, reshape him, repaint his face, and voila. A brand new man. Holy Mother. Why? Wouldn't it be better to just find a better one right from the start and leave the old one behind? Apparently not. Maybe it wouldn't be as much fun. I don't know. In any case, I didn't break. Angry, seething, and grim, I sculpted the ugliest monsters I could, while the walls of the workshop vibrated with daily doses of rage. If I let myself be changed, I would stop living. Human judgments are naive. Our knowledge of ourselves and our perception of events are limited. And so I died. That day, when Samantha called. At first, it seemed like just another commission. Then, as I stood with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to her calm, businesslike voice, it became an unexpected miracle, long awaited but completely unforeseen. Finally, when she ended the call and left me with the faint hum of the phone, I got convinced someone had played a stupid joke on me. Let's be realistic. In today's world, in our reality, are there really eccentric millionaires who offer a plastic artist making figurines out of molds an outrageous amount of money to buy everything he creates? Every damn monster? The only condition was that I would have to end my collaboration with all other galleries and shops, giving him exclusivity. Of course, it wasn't an easy decision, but the price should have compensated for it. My God, he was offering 3 times what my best buyers paid. That kind of money would more than make up for working in hydrochloric fumes, and in Margot's eyes, I would once again become an interesting artist. An artist with a sensitive soul and a fat wallet. Of course, I didn't believe it. Still, I decided to meet the girl who had called. Her name was Samantha, and she was an interior designer, currently working on a pub or club for some crazy monster enthusiast. She arranged to meet me in the afternoon at a cafe. The hours dragged on like one of Margot's favorite TV series. A prank or the contract of a lifetime. At 10 to 6, I got off the bus, sweating like a mouse, convinced that in the cafe garden, I'd see the laughing faces of a few buddies who thought it would be hilarious to drag me out for a beer. Instead, I saw a slender girl with long hair flipping through a thick, leather-bound book. And I died. In an instant. I felt something like pain, like a cramp, and was flooded by blinding blue light, like a lightning strike. My legs buckled, and I grabbed onto a street sign pole for support. The wind swirled around me, thick and trailing a stream of sparks. It was silver. People and cars froze in an instant. Frozen ice sculptures? Nothing moved. Not even time. Only the girl with chestnut hair calmly turned another page of the book. She didn't seem to notice anything unusual. The icy, blinding sky above me cracked open. A beam of white light poured from the fissure. A voice. She is one of us. Suddenly, trembling and clutching the pole, I felt it was true. One blood, I understood. One blood flows in us. The glass world, built of ice and frost, shimmered with diamond reflections. I saw human hearts in transparent chests, pulsing with a muted blue light. The ice sang and chimed like a crystal vessel accidentally struck. I knew that in a moment everything would shatter into thousands of fragments. Only there were no moments here. Samantha raised the specter of a glass to her lips and drank a sip of silver darkness. The sky gleamed with a frenzied brilliance. Against it, like a hologram, the enlarged silhouette of the girl hung in the air. In the cafe garden, among the stalagmites of tables, Samantha continued flipping through her book, while in the sky, her shadow soared with outstretched arms and a halo of flowing hair. The eerie angel opened its mouth, but the voice came from the crack in the sky. Samantha is the gate. And you are the key, my son. Remember the blood. I didn't understand a word. The ghostly face of Samantha turned toward me. Her eyes, with pupils like swirling galaxies, burned blue. The sky sang a high, vibrating tune, forming a monotonous chant. Life. A dream, the shadow of the girl said. I soared upward, flying with outstretched arms toward those galaxy-like pupils. I was dying. My entire life flashed before my eyes like a film. A series of images. Ugly. Caricatured. Full spouting clichés, vile teachers, pompous lecturers hiding their smallness, snobbery, and intellectual poverty beneath a veil of academic jargon. Vain, malicious, empty girls, jealous or annoyingly foolish colleagues, and Margot. My Margot. A pretentious, greedy, calculating petty bourgeois, a pretentious idiot with the soul of a miser and a schemer, convinced of her own perfection. Nothing. Zero. The princess instantly transformed back into a frog. And I had thought she was sweet? Wonderful? Beautiful? A small, squat, short-legged monstrosity dragging a bloated ass behind her? I saw in her a copy of her mother, an old toad with a perpetually dissatisfied face. My pearl turned out to be a pile of rotten slime. I felt no sorrow. After all, I was dead and free. Maybe anger. Of course. A great, all-encompassing anger. They want to destroy me. Crush me. Humiliate me. They are my enemies. everyone around me. Each of these beings, because foreign blood flows in them, said the voice from the sky. Remember the blood, my son. The film of my life spun like crazy. Images flickered before my eyes, blurred, swirling in a furious carousel. They merged into one bright flash, an ear-splitting explosion. I was blinded. A high-pitched, insistent whistle rang in my ears. The voice in my head buzzed hollowly. She is one of us. I fell to the ground, or rather, I felt as if I had slammed back into my own body with force. At least I didn't land head first, I thought, dazed. The icy world shattered into pieces, and I was almost sure I caught the moment when the frozen reality started to move forward again. I was still clutching the street sign pole. My heart pounded like a hammer, my knees felt strangely weak, but I also felt surprisingly good. No, I didn't think I was crazy. I know I should have, but that thought never crossed my mind. I had touched the unknown, encountered the supernatural, the sensation was electrifying, and in some bizarre way, I liked it. Something had happened that shattered the dull, hopeless everydayness. Something that made the hysteria about money, unpaid bills, and Pearl's future lose its importance, fade like worn-out jeans. Life had reached out to me, reminding me that it still held many possibilities in store. The future is not sealed, my heart sang. It won't end with rotting away in my relationship with Margot until the bitter end, with a disappointed, embittered old age standing behind my back. It won't end like that. That I knew for sure. I admit, I was pretty shaken. I had chills and crossed the street on trembling legs. It's not so easy to pull yourself together if you die and are resurrected a moment later. A little lenience, gentlemen. I finally managed to reach the safe haven of the cafe garden. I approached Samantha's table. She smiled at me and stood to shake my hand. "Hi," she said. She had a melodic, low voice that made you want to hear her sing blues right away. I smiled too. She raised her eyes to me, grey-green, no longer reminiscent of galaxies, but instead evoking vast, distant lands where peace always reigns. Those eyes could stir a longing for those mysterious places in any man. They certainly did in me, instantly. I pulled out a chair to sit. "I'm glad you came," she said casually. So was I very much. "I didn't order you a beer because I was almost certain I'd have to drink it myself." "You don't think you could manage?" I asked. Another smile, and a playful glint in those ocean-like eyes. "You underestimate me. A second beer is no challenge. Not for a woman who mingles with the bohemian circles of interior design. It's about reputation. Alone one can drink one beer, no more." "You can order your second one now," I said. She nodded. "Most certainly I will. Have you thought about the proposal?" I leaned back in my chair. It's hard not to think about it. It's as tempting as an offer from hell. "What do I have to give in return?" "My soul?" She raised an eyebrow. "As far as I know, just your hands for now. But the collaboration could evolve. Be sure to read the fine print. One day, there might be a soul contract hidden among them." "Have you signed one already?" "Unfortunately, mine was just a standard agreement. He only cares about your soul." She winked at me. "The client?" I asked. "Perhaps he's a dark gentleman with a whiff of sulfur?" "Our Lord Nabob," she muttered. "The future owner of a crazy pub in Gothic horror style." "No, wait, that's wrong. It's not supposed to be Gothic horror, but the realization of his strange visions. He's obsessed with every detail, every little thing. Everything has to be exactly as he planned. It's tough working with him, you'll see." "That doesn't sound very encouraging," I interjected. "No, it really isn't," she admitted. "But he pays exceptionally well, always on time. And if he's satisfied, there are bonus payments." I leaned in toward her. "Why didn't he contact me directly?" She shrugged. "Because he's eccentric. He treats his employees like his property. He thinks he can burden me with all kinds of tasks since I agreed to work for him. I'm to be the intermediary between him and you. There'll be a time for a personal meeting," he said. Honestly, I hoped that time would come much later. Meeting Samantha suited me far more than dealing with an eccentric, principled old man, which is how I imagined the client. And here I thought rich madman visionaries didn't exist in this country. She smiled. He's definitely not from our country. I don't think he's even from Europe. He's some kind of Arab or other person from the Orient. Probably a Levantine. A Levantine? I asked, surprised. She waved her hand dismissively. Oh, you know. Olive skin, a sharp, aquiline face, burning eyes, and a wild mane of grey hair. He speaks almost without an accent, but in a throaty way. Impossible, I said. Men like that don't exist. Maybe in B-movies. Damn, I almost forgot. He asked me to give you this book. Here. She slid a leather-bound manuscript toward me. It must have been very old. The embossed patterns on the leather were nearly worn away. The book had no title. Stunned, I flipped through a few pages. Parchment, not paper. Covered in dense rows of strange symbols, unlike any writing I had ever seen. What's this for? I stammered. I have no idea, she said. Certainly not for artistic inspiration. There are no pictures in it. A cold unease settled in my stomach as I considered that this tome might be stolen. I can't take it, I protested. It's probably valuable, and I have no idea what to do with it. Samantha sighed. Please understand, you have to take it. And you need to go through it carefully. It's a condition of the job. Please, that's absurd. I know. She nodded. But Mr. Farad insists. There's no arguing with him. A strange expression appeared in the peaceful realms of her green eyes. Was it fear? My fingers absent-mindedly traced the worn grooves of the book's cover. You could have easily left this brick at home or even thrown it in the trash. What are you afraid of? That the Levantine will find out by fortune-telling from coffee grounds. Maybe, she whispered, turning her gaze away. Or maybe I just want to be honest. He was very keen on you getting the book. Please look it over. Fine, I muttered. It seems if I take this job, I'll have to get used to some oddities. She smiled, a bit sourly. I've been trying to tell you that from the start. So, how many figurines does this magician from the Orient want? 10? 20? She lifted her glass to her lips. As many as you can make. And if that's 200? He'll be delighted and give you a bonus. But the figurines must be meticulous. And possibly diverse. I opened the manuscript at a random page and stared at the bizarre symbols. They seemed so alien and foreboding that a chill ran down my spine. The mystical experience by the street sign now felt as distant as the memory of a long-forgotten dream. I wasn't even sure if I had actually lived through it. Quite a story, I whispered. This time, Samantha's smile was warmer. Indeed, she agreed. Quite a story. But at least it's an adventure, right? People nowadays seem to have forgotten what that word even means. Who dreams of trekking through jungles or savannas with a rifle on their shoulder, discovering mysterious temples or ancient tombs, traveling with camel caravans, porters carrying trunks and tents, ships swaying in the harbors of exotic ports? Real adventure smells like the sea, cigar smoke, leather, wood, and the scent of plants that will never grow in your backyard. She suddenly stopped, embarrassed, and I would have loved to keep watching the way her face lit up with excitement, the spark in her widened pupils, the slight blush on her cheeks. For the first time in years, I felt a deep desire to capture that image, to freeze it in clay, in a series of hurried sketches, the beginnings of a real portrait. Suddenly, I remembered why I had wanted to sculpt in the first place, how that old overwhelming need from my youth felt, the urge to touch and shape clay so strong that my fingers almost ached with it. Samantha sat in silence, visibly embarrassed. Damn, I'm acting like a boy raised 50 years ago on his grandpa's books, she finally said. Well, at least you're not acting like a modern woman only interested in money and privileges, I muttered. She smiled. As you can see, I didn't turn down the money. I haven't slammed the door on the Levantine yet, though honestly, he has the whims of a prima donna. At least the work is interesting. So, are you up to joining the crew? I nodded. I'll give it a shot. After all, wholesale monster enthusiasts don't fall from the sky every day. Excellent. She stood up and extended her hand. I'll rush to deliver the good news to Lord Nabob. He'll be pleased. He was very eager to work with you. I'll call when the contracts and other paperwork are ready. Be sure to read the book. All right, but how will I know if I'm reading it upside down? I asked. The rule is simple. Green side up. She winked knowingly. See you. She didn't look back as she walked away, but I kept staring at her perfect legs and slender figure until she disappeared around the corner. She seemed to shine against the backdrop of other people like a star in the evening sky. And maybe it wasn't just an illusion. There aren't many things I truly regret. Just two. And that's already too many. I'm not talking about simple life mistakes like my relationship with Margot or the disappointment of not becoming a modern Rodin. I'm talking about true, gut-wrenching regret that makes you want to climb a rooftop at night and howl at the moon. I can't get over the fact that I never slept with Samantha or made her portrait. I never got the chance. It's so painful. I've wasted so many moments, so much time. I know I've been promised that I'll get everything back. There will be a time for redemption, for reward, but sometimes I just can't believe it. I can believe everything else, but not that I'll get Samantha back. I still hold on to hope, I live on hope, but faith. I'm missing the faith. I wait. Angry, frustrated, growing worse day by day. I sculpt monsters, legions, hordes of monsters with fanged jaws and hellish eyes, but I'm far from success. The worst part is, my work isn't going well. And yet, she is the key. I became the key, the one without whom the gate cannot be opened. Samantha. I talk about her to the monsters, who listen indifferently. After all, they're inanimate. I'm afraid I'll start hating them soon, even though it's my fault. I'm a faulty key, and I can't even become a working lockpick. I met with Samantha regularly. I delivered her the finished figurines, asked about the pub's design details. I was damn curious about what the project looked like. She never wanted to show me. When I complained that I needed to know what kind of interior I was making these monsters for, to tailor them accordingly, she just shook her head. Mr. Farad didn't want me to be influenced by anything. I was supposed to make the figurines my way. And I insisted I would make them my way anyway. Still nothing. She wouldn't even let me see the location where the pub was being built. The Levantine didn't want that. I started to feel a genuine dislike for the bastard, even though I wouldn't have met Samantha without him. The future pub remained a mystery. All I knew was that it was an old factory hall or abandoned warehouse, some sort of large industrial space that was going to be transformed into a magical place. She was as hard as stone for a long time, but when she finally admitted that she planned to supervise the work and personally contribute to most of the artistic elements, I made such a fuss that she couldn't resist. She showed me the sketches. What I saw was a strange, dark realm, a madness in shades of green and black, built from colonnades, stairs, and moss-covered stone blocks, a sunken kingdom of sorrow, a foreign, cold planet at the far end of the universe. This eerie Atlantis looked nothing like the gentle, underwater plains of Samantha's eyes. I had no idea who would want to party in such a place. Maybe lunatics and desperates. The sketches were drawn with a skillful, confident hand, but as I looked at them, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with the perspective. I analyzed the lines. Everything was correct. Yet, the strange sensation didn't go away. I glanced at Samantha. She avoided my eyes, clearly nervous. In a sudden flash of understanding, I realized how much it cost her to reveal the sketches. It was as if she was ashamed of her own project, or maybe even afraid of it. I felt a lump of strange emotion form in my throat. She trusted me more than I could have imagined. Amazing, I said sincerely. I've never seen anything like it. And the atmosphere. Give them back, she snapped, snatching the drawings from my hand. Gently, I held onto her hand. She still wouldn't look me in the eye. These sketches are incredible, Samantha, I said. I'm not lying. My monsters are nothing compared to them. They look like cheap trash. They don't, she muttered. I know what I'm saying. This pub will look like a piece of an alien planet. Terrifying and dark, but that's the point, right? Look, I got goosebumps just from seeing it, and I sculpt nightmares straight out of bad dreams. It's not easy to scare me. I did it exactly the way he wanted, she burst out. Every detail. He has it all in his head, like data stored on a hard drive. I just copied his vision. God, I feel like I've designed hell according to Lucifer's instructions. I wanted to hug her, comfort her, but I lacked the courage. I was afraid she'd push me away, that I'd lose her forever. Idiot. Another moment to add to my collection of missed chances. Come on, I said gently. This project is yours. You created it. You built it from your own talent. Even if someone else had input, they could never replace you. All right, she muttered, struggling to hold back tears. What's really going on? I dared to ask. She sighed. She looked pale and fragile, and I felt a pang in my heart. I don't know, she said helplessly. I don't like this pub. I decided to take the plunge. You're overworked, I declared. You know what? Let's take tomorrow off. To hell with it, we deserve a break. Let's go somewhere. My treat. Where? She raised her eyebrows in surprise. One thing I knew, nothing conventional. No cinemas, no fancy restaurants. How about the zoo? She smiled. Why not? I haven't been in 100 years. In a small, crystal-lined box with velvet lies the memory of that day. Simple images. We walk, laugh, sketch animals, eat ice cream. I buy her a helium balloon because she confessed she'd wanted one all throughout her childhood. It's a little treasure chest, a pirate's loot hidden on a deserted island. Simple images, and this old, legless madman with an eye patch is ready to defend them at the cost of his life. I spent the passing time sculpting monsters and meeting Samantha. I hardly thought about Margot anymore. I gave her money, we lived side by side, but we had little to say to each other. Our paths were diverging. I hadn't even noticed that, despite the clear improvement in our financial situation, my wife's attitude toward me hadn't changed at all. I was still a failure, a selfish person, and a host of other unpleasant characters, depending on Margot's mood. I wouldn't have cared even if she'd called me Herod and Charles Manson rolled into one. Forgive me, Snow White. Cold, distant, and unapproachable, you stopped being even remotely attractive to me. You turned into a frozen chunk of beef. I don't remember how many monsters I sent into the maw of the Levantine. Probably entire containers full. Living between my workshop and my meetings with Samantha, I was almost happy. My only fear was time passing. Once the contract ended, so would the pretext for seeing the woman who filled my world. I should have made a move, but I was so terrified of failure. The fear paralyzed me, especially my brain. Meanwhile, the project moved into the execution phase. Samantha grew nervous, tired, almost sad. She looked pale and frail. She was working a lot. I wanted to help her, but she said the client had strictly forbidden it. I didn't care about those orders, but Samantha took them seriously, so I backed off. I worked hard, but I never received any critical feedback from the client. He took everything on the spot and paid handsomely. The book sat on my desk, gathering dust. Sure, I'd skimmed through a few pages of strange symbols, which looked like ink-stained bug trails, but they quickly bored me. They lost their ominous character, and I never felt that eerie chill again when I opened the manuscript. I did, however, dream about the interior Samantha designed. I wandered through enormous, slimy colonnades, inhaling the ever-present smell of sludge and decay. I cleaned and recited inscriptions aloud from moss-covered stones, endless invocations in a guttural, incomprehensible language. I tumbled headfirst down steep stairs embedded in the heart of darkness, endlessly soaring between the cold lights of distant stars. I screamed in the void, and the grotesque faces of monsters turned their eyes, full of pity, toward me. I didn't put much stock in these dreams, attributing the grotesque visions to overwork. Anyone who spends 12 hours a day designing and sculpting monsters should accept nightmares with a healthy dose of leniency. As for the strange experience that preceded my meeting with Samantha, I had forgotten it completely. I had pushed it out of my consciousness. However, Samantha's appearance in my life felt almost mystical. I missed her terribly. I'd wake up at night, holding the phone receiver in my hands, using all my willpower and rational arguments not to dial her number. I wasn't afraid of Margot's reaction because ever since she got pregnant, she had made me sleep in the workshop. I don't think she suspected anything. She considered me too unappealing for even the most desperate woman. Personal Negro like me carry the burnt brand of a slave forever. Stupid, cowardly, servile slaves don't run away. Thus spoke Queen Margot. In the end, I no longer cared about Miss Soreface's judgments. I was worried about Samantha. She didn't look well. But I didn't get truly scared until the incident with the photos. She called me unexpectedly late one evening, asking for an urgent meeting. I raced to her small, cluttered attic apartment, breaking every traffic law. There was something off in Samantha's voice, something desperate. She opened the door before I even had a chance to knock. She must have been waiting by the hallway, listening for my footsteps. She looked very pale, with dark circles etched beneath the greenish-gray of her eyes. In the once peaceful land of her gaze, a storm was brewing. Did something happen? I asked stupidly, fighting the overwhelming urge to hug her and calm her down. She shook her head. Yes and no. Do you want coffee? Or maybe tea? For heaven's sake, I exploded. Don't ask about such trivial nonsense. What happened? You look like you've seen death. She nervously ran her fingers through her hair. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called you out so late. I shouldn't have bothered you at all. I acted like an idiot. I waved it off. Come on. I would have come from the other side of the world. What's going on? Talk to me. She bit her lip. Her eyes were filled with sadness. And fear. And exhaustion. I think I've gone crazy, she choked out. I think? Jesus, this isn't an adventure anymore. This is a madhouse. She pressed her fingers against her temples. Her hands were trembling. I stayed silent, figuring it was the best approach. Don't make any more figurines. Quit the job. Immediately, she said, deadly serious. I flinched in surprise. I can't. The pay is too good. I've never had such high demand. You have to. For your own good. Why? Does Farad have ties to the mafia? Did you find out he's a terrorist? Did he threaten you? Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. We'll report it to the special services, the police. I'll protect you. Everything will turn out fine, you'll see. She let out a nervous laugh. God, no. It's not like that. He? I don't know. I want to quit this job. I don't have the strength anymore. It's a bad place, a bad project. It's not bad at all, I protested. It's fantastic. You don't understand. She waved her hand dismissively. I'm talking about genuine evil. Something terrifying, not from this reality. Oh, come on, I groaned. You see. She smiled crookedly. I told you, madhouse. Wait, what are you talking about? She took a deep breath. The photos, she said. I still didn't understand. I took pictures of the finished section of the pub, she explained. They're alive. What? I blurted out, pretty scared by now. The photos. Or more precisely, the reality they depict. They shift. They show places that don't exist in the pub. And they're real. What do you mean real? I interrupted. She made a vague gesture with her hand. They have nothing to do with interior design. Through them, you can see another reality, some kind of city, but it's foreign. Not from Earth. Like you're looking through a window, understand? I can't explain it. I swallowed hard. You can see another planet? I asked. She shrugged. I don't know. Probably. And something lives there. Creatures. You can only catch a glimpse of them out of the corner of your eye. I've never seen one clearly. And I don't want to. They hide in the shadows. God, how this sounds. You must think I'm crazy. I'm a strange guy. It's not narcissism, it's just facts. Of course, I should have assumed she'd lost her mind. But instead of taking the obvious path, I remembered my mystical vision in the cafe garden. A cold chill ran through me. And it was very unpleasant. I didn't believe Samantha without reservations. I figured she'd had a hallucination similar to mine, a dream she'd taken too seriously, a bad day, a temporary fog, but I didn't rule out an encounter with the supernatural. In any case, I knew she had encountered something extraordinary. Calm down, I said. We'll deal with aliens, too. Show me the pictures. She rubbed her temples out of habit. I'll show you. But they don't always look like that. Most of the time, they're just normal photos. She walked over to the desk and pulled a large grey envelope from the drawer. I took it from her hands and pulled out glossy, smooth prints. And in fact, they were just ordinary photos. Samantha sighed. See? Nothing special. I exhaled in relief. At least she saw the same thing I did. I studied the photos as if I could bore holes into them with my eyes. Nothing happened. Throw them away, please, Samantha whispered. I don't want to touch them. All right, I'll throw them out, I agreed, pushing the photos back into the envelope. Do you want me to stay with you? No, no. There's no need, she mumbled. If the ghosts come, I'll chase them away with a broom. She looked like a ghost herself. I was afraid she might faint. I'll stay, I decided. I'll read your books while you lie down and try to sleep, okay? Thank you, she whispered. I don't know why I didn't carry her to bed. Probably because I'm an idiot. She was so exhausted that she quickly fell asleep. I sat by her side until morning, and when the pale fingers of dawn tapped on the windows, I left so she wouldn't feel awkward later. I took the photos with me. Samantha met me the next day. She was in better shape, and we even joked around. Neither of us brought up the issue with the photos again. I looked at them a few more times, but they were always lifeless. Maybe they only came alive in Samantha's presence. She is the gate, my son. The work on the pub was nearing completion. Peace had returned to the grey-green lands of Samantha's eyes. Sometimes, I had the sense that she was waiting for the end of the project like a prisoner counting down their last day in a cell. I no longer worried about losing contact with her. We had become too close, too essential to each other. The second death struck me unexpectedly. Once again, it started with a phone call. Samantha had gone to the pub to meet with Farad and finalize the last details. I was in my workshop, shaping another hideous creature, while the clash blared from the speakers. The phone rang like an alarm, and I just knew something terrible had happened. I leapt up to answer. As I grabbed the receiver, I noticed the photos scattered across the table. They hadn't been there before. They had been tucked away in the drawer. Now they finally revealed their true nature, dark depths filled with stone structures built in defiance of logic and physics. But I had no time to study them, as Samantha's terrified, hysterical voice crackled through the receiver. Oh God! That bastard did it! Right in front of me! I swear, he did it! What do I do now? What do I do? What did he do? I yelled. Did he hurt you? Samantha! For God's sake, what's going on? He did it, she repeated. She had to be in shock. What? For God's sake, what? He shot himself, she screamed. We were talking, and he suddenly pulled out a gun and blew half his head off. He's lying here now, and there's blood and brains everywhere, oh God. Her voice broke into a sob, consumed by pure terror. What happened? Hello? Can you hear me? Samantha. What happened? Holy God, she said clearly, though barely above a whisper. I can't believe it. The line was filled with strange, hollow noises, like thunder from underground, followed by a series of violent cracks and Samantha's piercing scream. The minutes I spent driving to the pub are my own personal hell. I knew the address, I had forced it out of Samantha once. I don't remember anything about the journey. Just fragments, streetlights, the blare of outraged horns, the screeching of brakes. I don't remember how I found the pub either. I have flashes of torn images, old factory halls, concrete slabs on the ground, weeds. I see these details with photographic clarity, but they don't form a coherent picture. I vaguely recall myself inside the pub, running, opening doors. Dreamlike images, and only one terrifyingly real vision, Samantha's body lying on the uneven stone floor, her chest sliced open from neck to abdomen, like a bag unzipped. The blood was black and smelled darker than death. It had matted her chestnut hair into clumps. The grey-green of her eyes held no more peace. The underwater plains had dried up, barren. In Samantha's pupils now lived a dead void. They took her from me. They took our life together, the years we would have spent as a simple couple of man and woman. Some crazy bastard, just an ordinary madman, had murdered Samantha. And he murdered me too, in a way, because why would he care that she was my whole world? That's the whole story. I sobbed, but they were dry, nervous spasms, like a cough, bringing no relief. I lifted my head at the sound of footsteps, almost reflexively, unable to believe that bastard would have the nerve to stay here. A tall figure, wild grey hair, and a dark face. I sprang to my feet, my mouth opening soundlessly as a red wave of hatred and rage forced the breath back into my lungs. The murderer. I croaked. You bastard. I'll kill you. You'll die. Die. I'll kill you. I screamed, shouting until I was hoarse, stammering, spitting, and crying, while he waited, patiently, for me to notice. I fell silent, dumbstruck. Farad was already long dead. He smiled with condescension, and the thought flashed through my mind that Samantha hadn't exaggerated. He really didn't have half his head. A charred hole gaped in his left temple, while a significant portion of his right side and part of the skull at the back simply didn't exist. I could see bone gleaming white, traces of brain, some bloody pulp, and fragments of torn blood vessels. I screamed, shouting until I was hoarse, stammering, spitting, and crying, while he waited, patiently, for me to notice. I fell silent, dumbstruck. Farad was already long dead. He smiled with condescension, and the thought flashed through my mind that Samantha hadn't exaggerated. He really didn't have half his head. A charred hole gaped in his left temple, while a significant portion of his right side and part of the skull at the back simply didn't exist. I could see bone gleaming white, traces of brain, some bloody pulp, and fragments of torn blood vessels. I stopped yelling because threatening a corpse with death felt oddly out of place. Son, he said in a guttural voice, don't judge by what you see. I would never kill one of us. There are too few of us left. Understand, she is the gate. Look, we have succeeded. The passage is open. Look behind you, child of my blood. I turned, feeling an icy chill of terror run down my spine. The pub was gone. The abandoned warehouses and empty factory halls had disappeared. Before me stood a city, vast, inhuman, and black. The structures, erected like mad fractals of endlessly repeating elements, formed a network resembling a tangle of interlocked scorpions. Spires piercing the sky, massive buttresses, multifaceted, irregular shapes, all gave the impression that the city had slowly grown like a malignant tumor. The perspective seemed distorted, with streets and tunnels twisting, growing, shrinking, and expanding unnaturally. The lower parts of the building sank into a sea, a vast expanse of inky liquid as thick as oil, stretching to the horizon. It reeked of decay and rot, a sweet stench of death that seemed to emanate even from the stones that made up the lower parts of the walls. The upper parts, bulging and festering with growths and protrusions, appeared to be made of some organic substance, irregularly expanding with the passage of time. I had the feeling I was looking at a monstrous polyp, some kind of ghastly coral colony. Above it all hung a black sky, marred by purple nebulae swirling in perpetual motion. I felt dizzy and nauseous. We stood on something like a balcony, a tattered bridge, or perhaps a tentacle extending from the building to latch onto the neighboring one. Farad turned his dark, burning eyes toward me. "Come, son. There's something you must see." The interior resembled the belly of Leviathan. Twisted, gnarled columns supported a bloated ceiling covered in wart-like growths. There was no furniture. From the shadows, 3 large men emerged silently, their faces identical and completely indifferent. One of them knelt, unfolding a drab bundle laid at the foot of the nearest column. A flash of bright cobalt blue cut through the black, rotten greens and browns of the interior. A sudden pang of fear gripped me. I turned to Farad. He seemed entirely calm. "Don't be afraid," he said. "You must understand. Know your own blood." The men pulled the blue tunics over their heads. In the dark hall, they seemed to burn with a blue flame. They all knelt, reaching for flat bowls filled with thick, blood-red paint. With solemn precision, they painted their faces and hands until they transformed into demonic mannequins, giant puppets from a nightmarish theater. "What?" I stammered, my throat tight. Fear turned my legs to jelly, my heart heavy like an anvil. Farad only shook his head. The men rose silently and approached me. I wanted to run, but my body refused to move. I stood frozen, watching my executioners come closer. They swiftly knocked me to the ground, stretching me out. One held my arms above my head, while the other sat on my legs. I fought, but I might as well have been battling a herd of elephants. Each of the cobalt blue executioners could have snapped my spine as easily as breaking a toothpick. "Farad!" I screamed. "Help me! Call them off!" The Levantine smiled and put a finger to his lips. For a moment, I stared at the ceiling, covered in pustules, then a bloody moon of an indifferent, solemn face hovered over me. I felt strong fingers tearing the fabric of my shirt. I began to scream, and his hands plunged into my chest, ripping me open. I howled, shrieked in agony and terror, convulsing in the throes of death, drenched in streams of hot blood. The blue and red executioners never loosened their grip. My screams weakened, turning into moans, then rasps. My vision blurred, and an icy, leaden cold flowed through my arms and legs. My breath became labored, rattling, fading. Someone drew the curtain of shadows, and I died. The pain disappeared instantly. My vision cleared, and I gulped air like a runner who had just finished a long race. The executioners stood, bowed deeply, and left. I sat in a pool of blood, visibly shaken. There was no hiding it, I was completely covered in gore. I trembled. Slowly, I lowered my gaze to examine my chest and abdomen. A thin red line ran across my skin, like a painted scar. "Welcome, son," Farad said, his voice laced with hidden emotion. "Now you understand." "Not really," I muttered. He extended a hand and helped me up. "Come," he commanded. I obeyed. I didn't feel weak or dizzy. The fear had passed too. I began to feel a strange exhilaration, as though I was about to take part in a grand event. Farad positioned me between 2 columns, and suddenly, I realized we had returned to the pub. We stood before a large mirror. "Son, run your left hand along the scar." The moment I brushed my fingers over the skin, it began to open. I was speechless. Inside me was a magnificent, intricate web of tendrils, pulsing, silvery snakes, their scales iridescent and rainbow-like. The wondrous creature I had been hiding all along. The creature that I myself was. I looked at Farad, tears streaming down my cheeks. I finally understood. I felt the connection of blood, a powerful, mysterious bond. "Father," I whispered, "what joy!" "I know. Why can't I stay home?" "Why did you bring me back?" I asked, unsure if I could live now with this overwhelming longing for my city, for the black diamond of our planet. "Soon you'll understand. You have a task to fulfill. You are the key. Samantha." I called out. I want to see her. He shook his head. Not now, son. She has returned to the city. She has completed her task. She waits there for you, to join with you forever and bear your offspring. I looked into the mirror's surface. For a moment, I thought I saw the outlines of buildings, a black sky streaked with fragments of galaxies, and Samantha's ghostly face suspended against the stars. She smiled at me. Her hair was like fire, and inside her open chest, silver, pulsating strings intertwined. The vision faded quickly, leaving behind only sadness. You are here to finally open the passage, said my father. He hadn't birthed me, but I knew I was his son, just as much as I was a child of all the elders of the same blood. I know how difficult your task is. I bow my head to you. An exile, always an outsider, always different. What have you experienced from humans except suffering? Recall the life we showed you when you first found the gate. I sympathize with you, and I envy you this task. Fulfill it, son. Once, we were everywhere. We ruled Earth. We had worlds at our feet. They banished us, drove us out with cunning. The gods fell dead asleep. We were exiled back to the Dark Star, our ancient home. We no longer rule the worlds. But those days will return, thanks to those like you. There are more of you, in various places on Earth. You fight, you work, you sacrifice your lives and happiness to awaken the gods. You hold the key in your hands, son. You are the key. You stand so close to success that I fear to even speak of it. You must find the true faces of the gods. Create their images and place them in the passage that the one you knew as Samantha has made. You will know when you see the light of the ancient in the eyes of the image. Find the souls of all the great ones, and then they will rise from their slumber and reclaim their dominion. Their lost inheritance. I wept. Father, I cannot do it, I whispered. Fight. He placed his hands on my shoulders. His black eyes glistened. You must. Some of the others are also nearing success. If several passages open at the same time, he stopped, afraid to say more. Fear, hope, and joy swirled through my mind like a tornado. You have a child on Earth. A daughter. I nodded absent-mindedly. Yes, but... He raised a finger, commanding silence. Do not underestimate her. If you passed on the legacy of blood to your child, she may be more powerful than you can imagine. I lowered my gaze. Yes, father. Check, he commanded. Do you know how? I did. Go, he said. You mustn't waste any time. I didn't ask if I would see him again. That would have been a childish question. The future soars among the stars in the sleeping minds of the gods. I returned to the workshop. The dawn had already smeared its rosy cream across the night sky. I wanted to get to work immediately, but I couldn't. My hands were trembling, my whole body quivering with emotion. I opened the old wardrobe where I kept my odds and ends. The mirror on the inside of the door was faded and dull, but large enough. I took off my torn t-shirt and rinsed myself in the sink. The scar on my skin was gone, but I could still feel it there. I walked up to the mirror, running my hand over my chest and abdomen. The perfect creature inside me stirred, awakened. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the smooth, silver threads. I smiled with happiness. With a movement of my hand, I closed the seam. There was something important to do. Something I am particularly eager to do. From behind the workshop door, I listened carefully to see if Margot was awake. Silence, a rustle, the sound of footsteps. Perfect. The bitch was there. In the kitchen. I could hear her. I bared my teeth in a wolfish grin. Now, in just a moment, we would talk about blood. We would look at it. Smell it. We would find out who truly belongs to the club. I opened the workshop door. She turned, surprised. I never stopped working at this hour. But now was the time of new rituals. Rituals that would no longer be performed in honor of the Queen. Oh no. the queen would be dethroned and unmasked. "What are you doing here?" she asked sharply, her hazel eyes filled with disdain. The nasty wolfish grin didn't leave my face. The hazel disdain quickly shifted to concern. "What's wrong?" "You're acting strange." "As usual." To her, I was always acting strange. Improper. Wrong. She should have gotten used to it after these few years. If only she'd ever paid attention to me. I stayed silent. Wolfish grin, wolfish eyes. The monster had crawled out of its den. She set her cup down on the counter. "Move," she snapped. "You're standing there like a stump. Can't you see there's nowhere for me to put my tea? Of course, you never care about my comfort. I could be drinking tea on the floor, and you wouldn't budge. You could at least try to be polite. It costs nothing, you know? A bit of good manners and respect for a woman. But no, not with you. You always act like you've just wandered in from the barn. Are these the values you want to pass on to your child? Every chance you get, you show just how selfish and uncultured you are." "No," I said. She raised her eyebrows. "No what?" "Everything." She shrugged. "Sorry, I missed the subtlety. Why aren't you working? You finally landed a decent contract, and you want to lose it. You won't find another fool willing to buy your stupid clay figures. I told you, move. I need to heat up soup for the little Pearl. Of course, you couldn't care less that your child is crying from hunger." She froze, her mouth hanging open. It was worth seeing that rare expression of shock in her hazel eyes, usually filled with disdain. A rare moment when, for once, she sat there quietly. "What are you doing?" she gasped. "What's that knife for?" I smiled. "To dethrone you, my queen." It took her a moment to understand. "As usual, your brain lags behind your tongue, darling." She squealed hysterically, trying to bolt, but I caught her around the waist and slammed her to the floor. The hazel disdain turned into panic. The overturned cup tumbled off the counter. I watched drops of tea splatter onto the floor. Queen thrashed, bit, and kicked at the air, her frantic attempts to hurt me utterly useless. Her legs flailed wildly, sending her pink, feathery slippers flying across the kitchen like exotic birds. Her long, scarlet nails snapped before they could reach my face. They couldn't gouge out my eyes. They failed, just as her feet couldn't land a proper kick, and her perfectly brushed teeth couldn't manage to bite down with any force. She tried so hard, yet her efforts were worthless. If intentions could kill, I'd be dead already. But unfortunately, Snow White, only a knife can kill, and you were made for love. For love. I laughed. A werewolf, a monster. And that's just fine. Now see for yourself, darling, that you have no power over it. You may have tamed the beast, but you used the whip too often. Now the animal has had enough. The animal, the shaggy wolf, the monster. She panted beneath me, drooling, panic distorting her face of a porcelain doll. The makeup smeared down her cheeks in black streaks, like tears. Too late for everything. She howled as I tore her clothes away, terrified I might want her precious, doll-like body. I, her husband. The monster. No, Snow White. Thanks, but no thanks. I have no appetite for frozen meat. With a swift motion, I plunged the knife down, dragging it from her sternum to below her navel. A scream. A shriek. Convulsions. And red. 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 Inside the open gash of her belly, sticky, slimy innards spilled out. Disgusting. Reeking. I chuckled. So, this is your true inside, princess. The secret revealed. And it's foul, stinking. I thrust my hands deep inside, pulling out limp, sad coils of intestines and throwing them onto the floor. She still writhed, her scream turning into a hoarse, gurgling rasp. Her bulging, terrified eyes didn't understand. You never were the brightest, were you, darling? Tell me, where is your secret soul now, Curly Bob? Where are all those marvelous wonders? They smell like sewage, I laughed, clapping my hands, now slick with red. What a surprise! Inside, you're nothing but rot, darling. Where's the pearl? Where's that precious jewel? Gone? Unbelievable! I giggled with delight. I knew it. I always knew you weren't one of us. Margot had stopped moving. Even the convulsive twitches had ceased. Her eyes, white and vacant, stared mindlessly at the ceiling. Her open mouth dribbled mucus and blood, an ugly, pitiless display of raw flesh. The bad boy had broken the doll. But let's think, maybe it's time to stop playing with dolls. Maybe it's time to react when dolls start playing with people. I knelt in a pool of blood, and the silver blade of the knife smiled back at me. My friend, if Margot could only see the state of the kitchen. You can't imagine the uproar. Wait, there's something else left to check. The quality of the pearl. I may not know much about jewelry, but I can certainly judge if it's real. I took my silent friend, silver beneath its layer of blood, and we marked our path with heavy drops of crimson. I leaned over the crib. My daughter slept. A sweet baby, with a soft cloud of infant hair across her forehead. Hey, I whispered. Who are you? One of us? She opened her eyes. Blue, not hazel. Mine. They stared at me intently, for a long time. Finally, a smile began to creep across her lips. A knowing, mischievous smirk, nothing childish about it. She winked at me and giggled, a sharp, unsettling sound, like rattling. Suddenly, she began to transform. I watched, mesmerized, as her head elongated, taking the shape of a rounded spearhead. Her eyes grew larger, turning crimson like two massive rubies. Her nose morphed into a horned crest, and her mouth stretched into a wide gash, filled with needle-sharp teeth. Her body lengthened, becoming covered in shimmering golden and red scales, with a tail tapering off into a bony club, ending in a hook-like stinger. Her arms and legs twisted unnaturally backward, as if preparing to bridge into a grotesque arc, pushing away from her torso on stiff joints, lifting her body upward. Her hands and feet sprouted short fingers, each tipped with powerful, curved claws. My beautiful daughter slid with graceful agility out of her diaper and blanket, and I marveled at the sight of her chest and belly, now her back, adorned with a row of bony ridges. Yet her head remained facing upward, her red eyes blinking at me, while her lipless mouth snapped its teeth near her neck. The place where the crown of her skull had been was now the spear-pointed tip of her head, reinforced with overlapping, hardened scales. She was so beautiful. Agile, swift, and lithe, like a flickering flame. I gazed at her in awe, a mixture of fear and pride swelling in my chest. I had never felt such immense pride in my life. My child, my daughter. How she surpassed me. Her perfection was flawless. The raspy giggle continued to spill from her mouth, and her red eyes blazed with a fierce, radiant light. I didn't dare speak. She darted around in the crib, nimble and agile. Then, she looked me straight in the eyes, winked again, and in an instant, she climbed the bars of the crib headfirst, gripping the wooden frame with her claws and the hook of her tail. In one fluid motion, she scurried down to the floor, head still hanging down, and darted into the depths of the apartment, her chittering giggle and the scraping of her claws on the floor echoing behind her. A deep shame welled up inside me that I had ever dared to doubt the purity of her blood. She was of the utmost fineness, flawless. I apologized silently to my perfect, powerful child, knowing without a shred of doubt that she didn't understand words like forgiveness or affection. I would never be worthy of the role I had been assigned. The only thing I could do for my daughter's future was to fulfill my task. I returned to the workshop. I've been sitting here for hours, maybe days. My hands are stained brown from dried blood. I'm crafting figurines. Creating monsters. My brothers, my children. Sometimes despair grips me. I scream, smashing the models I've made, killing the deformed children, those that are crippled. There is no room for imperfection. Then, I cry, smearing tears and snot with my blood-encrusted fingers. In those moments, Margot's blood briefly revives, glowing red again. I read the tome to calm myself. The sacred symbols of the ancients. Names, attributes, spells. I trace the grooves in the embossed leather, remembering Samantha. At times, I feel discouraged. I lose hope, staring into the empty eyes of creatures that will never be perfect. You are the key, I repeat to myself, but I no longer have the strength. Then I sit and listen. I hear the clumsy shuffling in the kitchen and the monotonous murmur. That's my wife, bumping into the furniture, endlessly dropping the bottle of milk for Pearl in her hopeless, repeated attempts to heat up the baby's soup. Poor thing, she's lost her beauty, I swear. If she could see herself now, she'd die of shame. But it's not her I'm waiting to hear. I'm waiting for the scrape of curved claws and the sharp, grating giggle. There it is. Coming from the living room. The soft sound of scratching as the streak of gold and red climbs the walls, rummaging through the cabinet. I will open the world for you, my child. Soon, I know. I have my moments of weakness, but I'm making progress. I'm working without rest. I know that soon I'll see the light of the ancients in the eyes of some grotesque, cheap clay figure. Are you afraid? You should be. It won't be long now. Maybe soon, maybe even right now. And then the world will belong to the gods and the wondrous, agile beings who know nothing of mercy or compassion. Wait. Just a little. As I do. It won't be long now. I know. I wait. I wait. I wait.